Still on energy, South Africans should embrace nuclear power. That's the word from the Energy Minister, Gwede Mantashe. He says nuclear is safe and should not elicit fear. Let's discuss this now with Ruse Moleshe, an energy analyst. Ruse, good afternoon. Welcome to today, and thank you very much for your time. I understand, of course, the Minister was addressing Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Mineral Resources and Energy just yesterday, and he's insistent that the country's energy reliability will need more nuclear power into the future, and we should not be afraid of it. What are your views?
Thank you, Dan, and thank you to the listeners. My views are that from an environmental point of view, obviously there's a positive when it comes to nuclear energy, and also from a baseload capacity point of view, there are positives. What we don't know for sure is the capital infrastructure that would be required. So a lot of work would have to be done to find what that will look like for South Africa. There are other positives in terms of costs, however, during operations. Even though your initial capital costs are relatively high. We have had experience with the Koeberg nuclear power plant which was built since the 80s. So we know that it can be safe, and we know that this industry is heavily regulated. Therefore, if the costs can make sense, nuclear would not be a challenge. There are, however, timelines in terms of preparing such projects.
Okay, before we talk about those timelines and the implications, I saw a report that the ESCOM acting chief nuclear officer telling Parliament that the cost of extending, for example, the life of Koeberg to another 20 years is about 20 billion rand. Do you think that would be money well spent?
Yes, it will be money well spent in the sense that, as I indicated initially, you have reliable source of supply that is relatively cleaner. So in terms of our just energy transition strategy, which South Africa is going with, if you are not going to be able to use your coal-fired power plants, you need baseload capacity that will be reliable, and nuclear is one of the options.
Yeah, so building another nuclear plant or just expanding Koeberg would help us?
Koeberg already, in terms of extending its life, is already in process. So that's a done deal. Another power plant would make sense if the economics of the project were to be put on the table for everybody to see.
Yeah, no, I understand France, a country like France in Europe, gets at least 75% of its electricity from nuclear power. I wonder why we didn't have foresight about this as a country.
Then sometimes our challenges in terms of energy planning are plagued by other issues outside of the actual technical realities. We had issues with respect to nuclear and the issues related to how the procurement was going to take place. So sometimes those are the issues come in handy. But if we looked at nuclear purely from an energy point of view, from an environmental point of view, and we did our numbers in terms of capital infrastructure, I think we would have done it a long time ago. Remember that many years ago, ESCOM identified sites and did environmental impact assessments, got hold of the servitudes, and we were ready to go, but we've lost that time now.
But environmental groups are not happy. They have been calling for the permanent closure of Koeberg.
What do environmental groups want? Because security of supply is critical for the country. And as I mentioned, in terms of emissions, you get zero emissions from carbon. So I'm not sure exactly why there's an outcry about nuclear. As you correctly pointed out, France has successfully run these plants for many years with a huge capacity. And Americas have got such, China is copying our technology that we're trying here in South Africa, and we abandoned because they see that there's a benefit in the long run. So I'm not certain what the challenge is with respect to environmentalists.
Did you just say we've come up with some ideas or innovative ways of solving the energy problem, and China is using them instead of us?
We were ahead when we had the pebble bed modular reactor in South Africa, We're doing a lot of research. We had a lot of scientists. Actually, the world is benefiting from our nuclear scientists that they are using now. We're going to all over the world. We abandoned that program. We didn't do what we were supposed to do. And in China, based on similar technology, has just completed their tests, and they are now going to go ahead and build that technology. But that's water under the bridge for us.
Yeah, so your sentiment is that Minister Mantashe is right in saying we should not fear more nuclear power, and that maybe extending the Kubek's lifespan by another 20 or so years with a cost of 20 billion rand would be a cost that's far less than if you were building a new nuclear power station from scratch.
Yes, if you look at the fleet right now that we have in the system, from an operational point of view, nuclear is the cheapest that we have in the country. So yes, we would have to have capital costs initially, but over time would relatively benefit from almost reduced costs in terms of operations.
Yeah, and the whole issue of decommissioning all fossil fuel post-2045 would be assisted if you really had an extended lifespan for Kubek in this matter as part of the energy mix, so to speak.
Correct. So with our just energy transition, where we are trying to make sure we reduce emissions, and we also want to have security of supply, because we can't just talk about environmental benefits without talking about security of supply. Because security of supply means that the economy is able to benefit from a reliability of electricity supply. So nuclear gives you both.
Okay. No, thank you very much for your time, Ruse, and insights this hour round about the country's need for a proper energy mix that includes nuclear power. I mean, government telling Parliament that it would cost about 20 billion rand to extend the lifespan of Kubek instead of building a new one, and it will be safe. We need to embrace that, and we need it. I mean, there's no two ways about it. I know environmentalists are not happy with the treatment of nuclear waste and other such things, but those things can be mitigated if you make sure that Kubek Nuclear Power and Eskom have a plan that is transparent and open for scrutiny in terms of dealing with nuclear waste. But we just need a more stable future when it comes to our energy supply in this country.